Hello and welcome to the second video in our series on women in the Bible. And this week we're going to be thinking about Sarah. She was originally called Sarai, and God said to her, "No, your name will now be Sarah." You can find her story in Genesis, and there's quite a big chunk about Abraham, her husband, who was Abram. So Abram and Abraham are the same person. So if you look in sort of Genesis 12 and onwards, you'll see passages about her. And there are three particular passages that we'll think about today and what we can take from them. So the first one is the story. Sarah and Abraham travel a lot, and it started with Abraham, or Abram as he was, his father. When he was still alive, he took Abram and Sarai as she was, and Lot, and they moved around and they went where he went. And then God calls Abram and says to him, "Look, you're going to be my guy. I want you to follow me." And he sets him off, and he said, leaves everything behind, and Sarai and Lot and Abraham go off and follow him. And at one point in their travels, they're going in to a new nation, and Abraham's a bit worried because Sarah was incredibly beautiful, and Abraham was really scared that people would see Sarah and want her for themselves, and they'd come and kill him in order to free her. Now Sarah was his half sister, so he said to her, "Look, when people ask, don't tell them that we're married, just tell them that we are brother and sister." So Sarah did, and the king got very interested in her, but fortunately God stepped in and said, "Don't take Sarah, she's married to Abraham." And the king confronts Abraham about it, and he admits it, and the king makes right and gives him gifts in spite of having been lied to. And then the second story is another famous story about Sarah is where she laughs. So three mysterious visitors turn up at where they're camped out, and Abraham rushes to hospitality mode and sets before them a beautiful meal and talks to them, and they're messengers from God. Some people think they're angels, and Sarah is listening behind the tent where they sort of sat under a tree, and she's hiding from them and listening, and they are talking to Abraham, and Abraham has had a covenant promise from God saying that he will be the father of great nations, and these three messengers are coming to reconfirm that with him. And he says, "Look, I'm old and I have no kids. How on earth can I be the father of a great nation?" And they say to him, "Within a year, Sarah, your wife, will fall pregnant and have a child." And Sarah hears that and she just laughs. She's sort of given up on ever having children. I think she's about 90 years old, so she laughs, and they hear her. And so they say to her, "Sarah, why did you laugh?" And she says, No, I didn't laugh." And they said, "You did laugh." And they go off, and within a year she has a child. But before she has a child, Sarah has given up all hope of bearing a child for Abraham. And one of the things that she does is that she takes her slave girl, Hagar, and tells her that she is going to be a surrogate, which was a very normal thing in those days. And she gives Hagar to Abraham, and Hagar, of course, falls pregnant and gives birth to Ishmael, who is sort of head of a lot of the Islam, the history of the Islamic people. And Hagar starts to bully Sarah and teases her for not having had a child, and Sarah gets very upset and insists that Abraham send Hagar away, and Hagar's sent to live in the desert. So there's quite a lot about Sarah in the Bible, and there's a lot of things that we can think about. And the first thing that always occurs to me, which has always frustrated me because it's something that I had to work through myself. Sarah was a people pleaser. You can see that she agreed with Abraham. "You want me to pretend to be your sister? Fine." okay, I'll do that for you. And then she's accused of laughing, and she can't bear the thought of people thinking that she's done something wrong, so she denies it. No, I didn't laugh. No, of course I didn't. Of course I'm taking you seriously. And when she feels like a failure, like she's never going to give Abraham a child, she does everything she can. She doesn't just wait for God to provide. She's like, no, I have to make this happen. And she takes responsibility for something that really isn't her responsibility, that she had no say over. And she goes and gives Hagar to Abraham. I'm fortunate that I've been surrounded by very supportive people, and it's taught me to stop being quite such a people pleaser. I'm not totally free of the habit, but I'm much better at not doing that now. But I do remember, especially as a teenager, I was somebody who would just do anything to try and make sure that life was easy for the people that I was trying to please. And it's quite a trap to be in. It's quite a trap when people's opinions matter so much, when you feel so responsible for the emotional well-being of others or for their good time, and it's a sign of low self-esteem, or it can be, where we don't recognise the value and the worth that we have in the sight of God. And I think often it gets in the way of us really listening to God's voice, because we don't want to wait for things just to happen, like Sarai didn't. And it's hard to call out what's wrong when we value other people's opinions and what they think matters above our own judgment. And sometimes it can be really helpful, where we end up doing a huge amount of good because we want to please people, although it doesn't always do us much good. And sometimes it can be really harmful because we stop others from being able to take responsibility for things because we keep grabbing it for ourselves. So I wonder if there's any area in our lives where we've noticed that we're people pleasing, where our decisions aren't based on what we think we really should be doing, but based on what's going to keep the peace, what's going to make people happy, what's going to make people think well of us. And I wonder if there are areas where we can reevaluate, or we can decide to spend more time asking God what the right thing is, and asking God for the courage to live to what the right thing is. So the second thing that I think about Sarah is that her family life is just a crazy muddle. She's got this bizarre life where she's a sister and a wife to somebody, and sometimes she's acting like his sister when he asks her, and sometimes as his wife. She's his wife, but also she's arranged for a surrogate, so she's got Hagar there. And Hagar's son Ishmael was technically going to be the surrogate son that Sarah was going to adopt, but she rejects him, sends him off into the desert. And there's Isaac, who almost gets sacrificed. And Sarah's waited so long, 90 years, to have this family. And in spite of the chaos and the confusion and the complexity of their family, Sarah is one of the founders, of our faith, and of the Jewish faith, and of the Muslim faith. She is this incredibly important woman in the genealogy of all three major religions. God has a huge use for her. And granted, we don't have a lot of stories about the quiet days in Sarah's life. And I'm sure she was a very devout woman, because they meet with God several times, and I'm sure they were careful to obey him, and she's willing to be obedient when quite big things are asked of her. Often we look for heroes in our church, I think. We see people who inspire us and we think, gosh, their faith is fantastic. And sometimes we discover that their lives are messy and we write them off. And I think one of the lessons of Sarah is that Christian heroes are complex people. And a lot of the big Christian figures have got complicated lives. And some of the things they do are fantastic and brilliant and God uses them. And some of the things they do are messy and difficult. And that's really tricky. At the moment, there's a scandal going on in the Church of England, maybe across most denominations, with the leader of a big faith camp where many have come to know Jesus. He's a leader of one of the churches where lots of people have been discipled and have had real spiritual experiences. But he's also done some really unwise things, and those things are coming out in the papers. And that's really hard if you're somebody who has come to Christ because of the words of somebody who's made some big mistakes. And I think it's really tricky in our churches when we discover that people's lives are messy and they make mistakes. Do we keep valuing them? Is it okay for them to still be leaders in our churches? Is it okay for them do we just let them go and try and forget everything they've ever said? And I think we have to be wise, particularly these days, in making sure that we are careful, that we're not putting people in places of power and authority without checking that they're going to be safe. But I also think we can't deny that sometimes broken people have spoken to us and we have heard God speaking through them, because God is great enough to do that. So I wonder if there are leaders in your life or people who have influenced you or heroes that you look up to that maybe you want to spend some time thinking about and thinking about the effect they've had in your life. I wonder if there are people that you need to forgive for being human and for sometimes having messy things. And if you're somebody who is in a place where people look up to you and look to you, which most of us I think are, although we don't always realise it, maybe we need to think carefully about being honest about the fact that life is sometimes messy, and be honest about the times when we think, actually, this has been from God. This is where I thought I was just going to take over and do my own thing, so that people can be clear and recognise that it is God who works in us, in each one of us, rather than it all coming from ourselves. That's probably plenty for today on Sarah. That she's a very interesting character, and there's lots more about her in the Bible. So please do go and read some of Genesis and find out more about her. Thank you for joining me today, and we will see you next week for the next character in our Women of the Bible series. Bye.